in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. It's almost like in the land of the smelly, the guy without without sense of smell can get around.
He gets it done.
On this week's episode of the Super Secret Podcast, touch, sight, hearing, smell, and taste. Join us as we tier list the five senses. Welcome to the Super Secret Podcast, a show where we dive deep into a topic of interest and use what we've learned to pitch a game to you. I'm your host, a sight to behold and a smell to bemold, Joel Watts, aka the Joel Watts on all social media, and I'm joined as always by my co-host
Danny Ayub, hoping that I'm a safe distance away from your smell to behold or whatever it was that you said.
Oh, I put on some cologne before the show, so I think I have quite a French wafting going on.
You still wear Glade?
Glade? No, I'm an Old Spice man.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, Danny, so last week we took a look at Dan Harmon's Story Circle and we made it into like a Mad Lib style party game. So that's what we came out of the lab with last week. And you can hear all about that on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or our personal favorite platform, YouTube. Now, while you're checking us out, our library of past episodes there, please like and subscribe and share with your friends who love deep dives and gaming vibes. Today, we're going to be talking about something almost all of us have in common, the five senses: sight, taste, hearing, touch, and smell. Danny's least favorite right now, I'm sure.
At the moment, yeah.
Yeah, and I do believe that we will try to put all five senses on a tier list, as you can see here. But before we dive deep down that rabbit hole, Danny, I got a question for you.
Oh, yeah, the question. Question of the week.
Question of the week.
Oh, my goodness.
So it's spooky season.
Yeah.
I think this is our second spooky season as a podcast. I forget what we did to celebrate
Serial
Halloween.
Killer with Jack Malacat, which just got re-released with a brand new box. Super cool. High quality. There's art on all the cards now. If you have not got a copy of Serial Killer, you should go check it out. Venom House. Just Google Serial Killer game, and you should be able to find it. You can find it on Amazon, wherever. But
wow. Well, I guess we have our ad read already done right there.
There you go.
That was quite the plug from Danny. And yeah, Jack Malacat was our guest last time. So I guess in that vein, I'm in a spooky mood. So let's paint a picture for you.
Yeah.
You are in the haunted mansion, and you're at a crossroads of hallways. You can either go forward, but in front of you is Dracula. Behind you, coming up, the mummy shambling behind you. To your left, the Wolfman, and to your right, Frankenstein is lumbering down upon you.
yeah.
Who do you try to either fight or make it past? You can make a beeline. Any of these directions will get you out of the house, but you got to choose one to go through.
Am I Luigi?
Luigi, the Mario brother?
Yeah.
Luigi Mario? No, you're Danny.
Okay. Well, it was worth a try. Luigi has a lot of experience with haunted mansions, so I thought that would give me a little bit of an edge. I'm going Frankenstein. I'm going to go Frankenstein because recently I was in Bath where Mary Shelley wrote lots of Frankenstein, and I went to the Mary Shelley Museum and learned a lot about Frankenstein.
I have a feeling possible future episode down our
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And one thing I learned about Frankenstein is that he really just wants to get laid. And so if I just made some promises about setting him up with a certain bride of Frankenstein, I'm pretty sure I could get by and make a friend.
You could be a wingman.
I could be a wingman. And
Yeah.
also, I could probably sick him on you at that point.
Well, I do, especially with my hair like this, I do get awful purty. If I just shave the face, you could probably squint and...
A few more squirts of the Glade, and you're good to go.
Yeah, plug it in, you know what I'm saying? So, with that's a good choice. So, I would have to say, okay, from my perspective... Wolfman's out. I feel like Wolfman might as well
shredded.
be a black bear.
Yeah.
Like you're not getting past Wolfman. That's
black bear would be easy compared to Wolfman.
Yeah, serious.
Polar bear.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm just going to, for the fun of it, Frankenstein's out for me because you already chose him. So before me, Dracula, behind me, the mummy, and I feel like they both have immortality to promise, but a different version of it. And let's face it, if I have to succumb to one of them, I feel like the Dracula death is actually potentially a rebirth, and secondly, it's probably like the nicest death. I feel like the mummy's going to extract all my fluids from me if I don't get past him
Yeah.
or knock him down.
Just
Now,
like a
granted,
succubus.
he's probably the easiest one to get past.
Yeah.
A good, if I was a really good tight end or something, like a running back in the, if I had those skills, I bet you I could take on the mummy. But yeah, he's definitely going to be sucking me dry in a non-sexy way. He's going to turn me into, the desert, like the sandy desert, versus Dracula. He's going to suck me dry, at least in a sexy way. So I feel like win or lose, I'm winning with Dracula.
What if Dracula was just like, I'm not going to suck you dry, but you have to be my familiar? Are you going for that, or are you just turning around and hightailing it back to the mummy?
I mean, like, I want to see what the contract looks like.
Yeah.
I'd say, yeah. If he catches me and wants me to be his familiar, I'd say, well, let's pull out pen and paper. Let's take a look at this. I'll get my reading glasses on.
I feel like you'd be an excellent vampire, for the record.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I definitely, in what is it? The show, What We Do in the Shadows.
Yeah.
In the movie version, which I saw the movie, they, the idea was like, oh, I'm getting past my prime to be a vampire. It's like, please turn me now because I'm like, this lady is the familiar of the group is getting a little too old. I feel like I'm on the precipice of that. It's like, if I don't turn into a vampire soon, maybe it's best I don't.
Yeah. Well, one can only hope.
Yeah, one can only hope. But we hope that you also have an idea of what you would do in that scenario. So, folks, tell us, which of these monsters do you think you have the best chance of getting past, or wouldn't mind succumbing to?
Getting busy with.
And getting busy with, for sure. And you can tell us all about that in 3 different ways. Number 1, answer our comment. Or, leave your answer in a YouTube comment. That's like where our favorite place to watch the podcast is. That's where I watch most of my podcasts these days. So you leave a comment there, we'll definitely see it. Number 2, Danny will find this one. If you at Megamoth Studios on TikTok with a video response, Danny will see it. And you know what? We might be able to put you up on the screen.
We put you on the screen.
Please.
Have a little React content.
Yeah, I would love to do. Man, that's actually ultimately the ultimate goal of anybody who's doing YouTube content is just become a React person.
Yeah.
It's like I'll be streaming on Twitch as a React person for the rest of my life if I could.
For a really long time if you're a vampire.
Exactly. Oh, I want to criticize your politics.
I want to criticize your content.
Yeah. And then finally, and this is like this is like the, what would you call this? Like the just a hammer right to our face.
You're talking about showing up to your apartment?
Yeah, basic. This might as well be showing up to my apartment and letting me know what I think, is to leave your review or your answer as the text to a review on Apple Podcast. And if you rate us 5 out of 5 stars, we'll read that on the air. But we're going to take a quick break with that. And when we get back, we're going to be talking about the 5 senses.
Ooh.
Thank you so much for tuning into the show today. And as always, we are brought to you by X Secrets of Fortune, the game that we both created. The game is live on Pledge Manager. So that means that you can buy your copy of X Secrets of Fortune through Pledge Manager. The way you would get there is you can go to Kickstarter.com, look up X Secrets of Fortune, and there will be a late pledge button. Click on that, and it'll take you to the Pledge Manager where we still have plenty of our bundles available for you. Not only that, but you can also get any and all of the add-ons that we had initially offered during the Kickstarter. So go to Pledge Manager or to Kickstarter, look up X Secrets of Fortune, and get your copy today while you can still get a discount on it, and you can still guarantee your first edition copy of the game. And what makes the first edition copy special, not only does every card in the Action X deck come with a special first edition logo stamp, but also you are going to receive a first edition booster pack. This pack will contain at least 5 cards that can go into the Action X deck right away to augment your gameplay. These cards may be available in the future, but probably never with these first edition artworks on them again. So go to Kickstarter and late pledge and get your first edition copy of the game. Now, back to the show. Welcome back to the Super Secret Podcast. We are now ready to dive into the 5 senses. So, Danny, I believe the plan is for us to make a tier list of the 5 senses. But before we do that, you wanted to bring some facts to the table in order for us to better evaluate each of the senses.
Yeah, I thought it would be fun to give a little context for how this episode even became an episode.
Mm-hmm.
we are going to do some fun stuff with perception down the line and go deep on some really spooky forms of perception in the future.
Yeah.
But we wanted to start with just the normal stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I, as I do, am a curious cat. And one day I had a thought, which is like, are all the senses equal to each other? We have 5 senses. Everyone, not everyone, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, the vast majority of folks.
The vast majority have a sense or 2 or 5. And I thought to myself, like, is my sight equal to my smell, equal to my taste, my touch?
Uh-huh.
And then I started thinking, like, okay, like, probably not. I mean, how many things are just exactly the same? Almost nothing.
Yes, correct.
So then I was like, okay, is this something people already know? Is this something that, like, I can just Google and find out? And it turns out this is knowledge we have. So I wanted to understand how to compare the senses to each other to see how good they are at letting us know what the world around us is like.
And this happened to be happening while we were on a phone call, and I was on my way back from, I think, visiting my family to Houston. And like halfway through the conversation, while you're spilling out all these facts you're about to go through, I was like, why aren't we recording this? So this is kind of like an episode that came across just because of us, the type of conversations we would have just normally on the phone.
The big takeaway here is this is the kind of stuff I look up on my spare time.
Yes, exactly.
And inundate Joel with.
Exactly.
While he's trying to focus on the
my
road.
free time. All right. But I remember it was some pretty interesting stuff here. So what do you got?
All right. So first, in order to have this conversation, we've got to have a means of comparing any of the senses to each other.
Yeah.
Okay. So
a unit of measurement.
Some sort of unit of measurement. And so interestingly enough, the best unit of measurement for this actually comes from information theory.
Okay.
You have any guesses what it is?
I think information theory would be like, computer bits, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly right. So it's information rate measured as bits per second.
Okay.
So when we look at the different senses and try to compare how they are in relation to each other, we're asking what is the bit per second input of sensory data into our brains that is giving us information about the world.
Yeah.
The idea being the more data we get per second, the higher fidelity, the image that we have in our brain. Image is maybe not the right term per se, but the more we are able to conceptualize or map our environment through these data points.
Yeah, exactly. That's it's so amazing. Like even talking about, let's just take a pause here, but just to talk about like the senses, how they all come together. We, when we watch film, just really quick, it's like we're getting 2 senses, like light or sight and sound. And it's like if you go to like one of those like novelty theaters, you might also get like touch and a smell or something like that at a theme park novelty theater. So, just like the way of mapping out the world. I think there's a great scene in Daredevil where they actually show what his vision looks like when it's a combination, like how he perceives the world when it's a combination of all the senses besides his eyes.
Yeah.
I mean, so just, if you're at home, please take a moment to appreciate like all the senses individually as we go through this.
Absolutely. This would be a great time if you're watching us on YouTube to close your eyes. You're not missing much.
Exactly.
Okay, so just before we jump into it, because I know there are going to be some people in the audience who are, a little less on the initiated side as it comes to the concept of a bit, I thought it'd be useful for us to give just like a, basic definition of what a bit is.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of what we're talking about, right? And so a bit is a unique binary distinct data point that has roughly a 50% probability. So the classic example of this is going to be a coin flip, right?
Okay.
It's either going to be heads or tails.
Okay.
Everyone's familiar. I don't want to say everyone, but many people may be familiar with binary code, 0 or 1.
On or off.
On or off, yes or no, true or false.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about bits, we're talking about that is what 1 bit is. So when we're talking about bits of information, it's a bunch of yes, no's, this or that's, binary, probability 50-50, information streaming in to build a larger picture. This is what our computers are based upon, and it's not just 1 bit. 2 bits is twice as much as 1 bit, although 2 bits is twice as much as 1 bit. Every time you go up the chain, it's squares.
Yes.
So, or maybe not squares, but to that order. So 3 bits is 2 to the 3rd, 4 bits is 2 to the 4th. So you're doubling pretty rapidly. So, okay. So we've talked a little bit about bits. Bottom line is it's just discrete data points, oversimplification. But for the sake of what we're talking about, how much data are you getting per second? Right. So Joel, I've got a couple questions for you. One, I think we've already answered, but do you think all the senses are equally good?
No, I do not. Well, I'll say this. I don't think that they have equal bandwidth, but I do think their application is, like their bandwidth to how immediately applicable they are is different. We can get into that later, I think. But yeah, I do not believe bandwidth wise, it's obvious there's a difference to me.
Okay. Do you think that they're close to being equal in their range?
I would say not close. I would say the smallest bandwidth and the largest bandwidth are going to be vastly apart. Now there might be some that are closer together. I think hearing and sight are going to be pretty close together.
Okay. Well, as you know, this podcast is all about the game, and as you know, I can't just give you information.
No, heaven forbid.
So what I'm going to ask you to do is to rank order the 5 senses: touch, taste, smell, sight, hearing. I think that's 5, right?
Yeah.
In the order that you think they fall in terms of highest bit rate to lowest bit rate.
Okay. I mean, I think vision. Sight has to be number 1.
Okay, we got vision at number 1.
Yeah, vision at number 1. It's just there's so much information, there's so much depth. Though we have so many more words to describe what we hear or see versus what we hear. But I would put hearing at number 2 in terms of
hearing number 2.
So then it comes to like, and I feel like these 3 senses in some way, like even more so than sight and hearing. It's like those 2 go together, and then I feel like the other 3 go together in their own way. So we have touch, smell, and taste, right?
Yep.
So I think I'm going to say that touch is going to be number 3.
Okay, touch number 3.
Which mostly because of how much more receptors we have. It's probably like
so many receptors.
Yeah. It's like it has the most potential, and like we could be touching 3 different things at once and identify all 3 of them versus taste and smell. See, the way I think of this is when you smell something, either you want to push it away, or you want to explore it further, and exploring it further is to taste it. So I feel as though taste has to have more going on than smell.
So taste is number 4.
Taste is number 4, and smell would be the number 5.
How do you do? 5 out of 5. Wow. Is Joel a sense genius? I think you might be a sense genius, Joel.
I've spent a lot of time with them. I've done, I think as a writer, and I do want to say this, I referred to movies earlier and how you only get 2 senses there. I think the thing with novels, that sort of writing, is you can actually indulge all 5 senses very easily. Like you can actually describe taste and smell. That doesn't usually come across without like overacting on, screen.
Yeah.
Anyways, we go on.
So now that we've established the hierarchy, vision is the highest bit rate, hearing, touch, taste, and smell. Let's throw some guesses out there as to what these bit rates are roughly. So what would you estimate the bit rate is for vision? Well, let's start on the bottom actually.
Oh, okay.
Smell. How much? What do you
bites
think?
Per second? You're saying
bits per second.
Bits. Not even bytes. Bits per second. I mean, this will give us a baseline. So I'm going to start with something. I'm going to say 200 bits per second.
200 bits per second for smell. Okay. I wish I had a pen here. Take some notes. You usually carry pens, don't you?
I do. I just changed my pants, but I can grab you one.
Okay. We're taking a brief pen break here. Joel changed his pants. We don't know exactly why. We can just assume that it was a style choice and not some sort of accident. But maybe he'll enlighten us when he gets back. Thank you.
I'll leave it a mystery.
All right. The mystery of the pants change. Okay, so we have smell at 200.
Okay.
What about taste? Where's taste at?
Well, I'm gonna say that taste. I think you could taste like 3 times as much. So I'll say 600.
Okay. And what about touch?
Now touch is. I'm gonna say 2400.
2400.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And what about hearing?
So It's so funny. It's like all of these could be described as a version of touch. Like everything's touching something. Hearing 2400, I would say. I feel like hearing and smell and touch are going to be very similar. So I'm going to say it's probably 3600. 3600. Yeah, 3600.
3600.
Yeah.
Okay, and what about vision?
I think vision like kind of tops them all. I'm going to say like that's 3600. I'm going to say 10K.
10K.
Yeah.
All right. So we've got smell at 200 bits per second, taste at 600 bits per second, touch at 2400 bits per second, hearing at 3600 bits per second, and vision at 10,000 bits per second. So interestingly, as we look at this range here, everything is within a band of about, between 0 and 10,000. So everything is, obviously there's a discrete hierarchy for how good they are, but the amount that they are good in relation to each other is pretty narrow. It's like smell and vision. I mean, vision's 10,000 compared to 200. That's pretty significant, but I mean, it's not crazy, right?
Yeah.
All right. So what are the real numbers? Smell.
Actually
got pretty close on this one. 100 bits per second.
Okay. Well, at least we're anchoring at like closer than not. That's not bad.
So taste, you said 600 bits per second. Also not too far off. Taste is 1,000 bits per second.
Okay. If that's the difference, then this is going off the rails really quickly.
Touch, you said 2,400 bits per second. I can say that I don't want to be intimate in that world. Touch in our world is 100,000 bits per second.
What? So, but right now, wait, that's 110 times. So, smell to taste was 10 times greater, but then taste to touch was 100 times greater. Am I right on that?
Yeah, it's 100 times greater.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
Hearing is actually just neck and neck with touch. It's 100,000 bits per second.
Oh, really? So hearing and touch are pretty much the same. Okay.
Yeah, pretty close.
Okay.
Vision depends on the individual.
Of course, yeah. I mean, there's fighter pilots and there's, dweebs who have to wear glasses.
But vision's bits per second ranges between 1 and 10 million. 1 million to 10 million bits per second.
Wow. So base vision is still 10 times greater in bits per second than best sound, best hearing.
Yeah. And so, I mean, there's some interesting takeaways from this, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, in your analysis, you had the order right, but you kind of imagined them as being, closer in fidelity to each other than the data would suggest.
Yeah.
And so now you think about, okay, for all of us who are not blind, we are inundated with 1 million to 10 million bits per second of data that overwhelms by at least a factor of 10, but up to a factor of 100. 10x is a tremendous factor, right? And how it kind of tells you how much of how we perceive the world around us is informed by how we see it, what we see.
Yeah. Well, it also, I mean, that goes to show like why, like when people are having headaches or whenever you're trying to think, like one of the first things that you feel like you see people doing or think to do is close your eyes. You start, you close your eyes because just closing off that much sensory coming in probably opens up a lot of brain power for you to do other thinking.
No, I mean, that's a fantastic point. I mean, I didn't even connect the dots on that right away, but you're absolutely right. Like if I'm going deep in the tank on a thought and I really need to just work something out, first thing I do is close my eyes. You know what I mean? Like I don't want the visual data. I want to just be where I am. And again, like this is why I think, people who are born blind, especially interesting, because now their world is being informed by these other senses at these other bit rates. And, as I'm sure most of us have heard, and I don't have a lot of information on this. I wish I had some now. But, they always say like, if you're missing one sense, your other senses tend to be more developed.
Yeah.
So I would love to know, is 100 bits per second the average bit rate for a person who was born blind? Or is the hearing higher? That's something maybe we can look up and report back on. But
that would be an interesting one, though. I do think, and I think we might be getting to this, or you might be getting to this, but to jump the gun, but it might not be. It's like, what is that classic saying? It's not the size of the boat; it's the motion of the ocean. I think it's a situation where what I do with that 100,000 bits coming in through my ears is probably not as nuanced. I don't process the data in the same way that somebody who is blind is, who has to have relied on their other senses and having to really hone in and focus. So it might be more of a processing issue at that point.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. I mean, you imagine it as though, again, we come from a film background, right? And you're editing audio, you know what I mean? And let's just do it strictly as like, let's convert all of the senses into audio and just talk about it in terms of volume, right? As an analogy. You're not going to necessarily hear the subtle things you're capable of hearing if something is very loud on that track. But if you remove the loudest sound, you're starting to hear more nuance. And you may be able to hear the quietest sound if everything else is removed and appreciate it and analyze it differently. But if you're inundated with those loud sounds, you can't perceive it.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's part of the reason why I wanted to have this conversation, especially as we delve into more, let's say, esoteric forms of perception.
Yeah.
The way we perceive the world and what we perceive about the world is so informed by what's coming in, and not just everything that's coming in, but how everything coming in is coming in relation to itself. Like you said, you're overwhelmed with vision. You might not even be able to think through stuff or sense. You might not be able to pick out a sound or something because you've got so much coming in visually. So you shut down the visual field, and now all of a sudden you're able to focus a little bit more.
Yeah.
All right. So, I mean, one thing I also think is pretty crazy, and I want to get your reaction to this.
Okay.
Did you think that the difference between, forget vision, even hearing and touch at 100,000 and smell at 100 was a factor of 10x? Did you think our smell was that much weaker than even our middle level senses?
See, this, and it's so interesting because you could almost start thinking about how other animals react. Yet again, I might be jumping the gun here, but you know that saying, you can't trust your eyes. And there's like a lot of people, like if you talk to people about like, vision in seeing, it's like there's so much data that our brains are almost like overwhelmed with it. So the sense that I would have actually, and we'll get into it in the tier ranking, but I think smell is super important. It's the most direct sense. I think that if you were your nose is the one that's going to tell you if a situation's like maybe not good. You should listen to the nose. So I'm almost not surprised, because I think with the lack of bandwidth, the immediacy of how like whatever strikes you, it's like a punch in the sock in the face, a sock in the jaw, versus like your eyes. You can become confused. Like if something's dangerous is out there, but you're not sure exactly what you're seeing, you could spend too much time looking at it. But if you walk into a room where, unfortunately, say maybe there's a dead animal, you know instantly that there's a dead animal, and you adjust accordingly. So I do think that I'm a little surprised. I'm sure that, like you said, like how there's a difference with people visually. I'm sure there are people who have more advanced olfactory senses. So I'm sure that 100. I'm sure there's some people out there who might have closer to 1,000.
Yeah.
But I'll say I'm not super surprised. I always considered the nose to be like the most direct thing. I guess I just wasn't. I'm a little surprised that it was so much smaller than even taste. I would have thought that the nose would have been like I said, I think half of the taste buds, but I guess it's a tenth of the taste buds.
So while we're on the subject of smell, this kind of wanted to be something I kind of wanted to drop as just a little bit of flavor here. We all know that, different members of the animal kingdom have their senses calibrated differently.
Yeah.
And one obvious example that we hear a lot about is dogs and smell.
Uh-huh.
What do you think the bit rate of dog smell is?
So that's the thing. It's like that's their vision in a lot of ways. So I can't imagine it's in the millions, but maybe 50,000.
So not quite that high, but it's approximately 10,000 bits per second. So
okay.
What is that? 100? That's 100 times better than ours.
Yes.
So that's pretty significant, and that means that they can smell 1,000 times better than we can. 10 times better than we can taste. So, kind of give us a sense of like,
yeah, jealous now. And with the crap that we feed these dogs with that kind of taste, because I have to imagine if they have that good a smell, their taste has to be pretty close.
Yeah, and I think we'll dive into maybe what some of the experiential implications might be of that in our Patreon conversation of the week, which will come a little bit later on. But if people want to hear that, they're going to have to go get a free membership to our Patreon.
Yeah, go to patreon.com, look up Mega Moth Studios, and sign up for free while you can.
Okay, so here's another one. Hearing in bats.
Oh, wow, that's an interesting one. Because they yet again, this is how they navigate. And our hearing is 100K?
Our hearing is 100 bits per second.
100 bits per second. Sorry, yeah, 100 bits per second. So I'm just going to have to assume it has to be like 5 times greater than ours. So I'm going to say 500 bits per second.
Sorry, 500,000 bits per second?
500,000, yeah, sorry. My misspeaking.
That might be accurate. So it's measured to be approximately up to 1,000,000 bits per second.
Okay, up to 1,000,000. So their hearing is equating to our vision.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
Okay. Now here's one that I mean, I again, this is a little bit more research, so I'm hesitant to even bring it up. But electric fish have something called electrosense. I don't even know what that is, but
that sounds cool as hell.
Yeah, I'm assuming it allows them to, I don't know if it's the electromagnetic current or whatever, but they're able to. I mean, we all give off electricity, right? We all have electromagnetic fields, I believe, as organisms, and the environment. They probably can detect things that it's hard for us to even really perceive of. I imagine it's almost like they're energy fields.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like something my witchy girlfriend would say.
Yeah, and so they have that sense attenuated to up to 100,000 bits per second. So like for them, that's like their hearing or their touch. They have this sort of field detection. So one more of these before I hand it back to you for whatever you have up to. We're going to get up to. Vision in birds of prey.
Birds of prey. Okay.
So
now we're talking like eagles.
Eagle eye. What are we talking here?
I'm talking about something tasty, but they can see their prey from the sky. Like they are practically satellites before there were satellites. Like if we could have tapped into them. So, I have to imagine their vision. If ours are at 1,000,000, theirs have to be at like 50 million.
Up to 100 million. Bits per second for the eagle eye.
Jeez.
Birds per prey. Yeah.
I would love to know how that compares to like the sensor on this camera right here. Like I'm sure we could find out,
Yeah, that'd be crazy.
Yeah, to see how good it is compared to a consumer electronic at this point. But that is wild, and that's like they no wonder they are the original fighter pilots.
Yes. So,
actually, that would have been a good one to answer. Like average human or an average person versus like somebody who's like been graded to be a jet fighter pilot, because I know that's the huge factor is like their vision has to be top notch. So
yeah.
They have to be. What did you say? The higher
10 million was on the high end. So maybe that's what we're getting with our fighter pilots. Is,
I have to imagine mine.
Still
is
a tenth of an eagle.
Mine is probably like 80,000 or 800,000 on my vision. Yeah, 800,000 is my vision. But yeah, so they're closer, but they're still much less. They're still like.
What do you think your smell is?
My smell is probably awful. I actually kind of did want to bring that up. I mean, I'll confess this to you, audience. Danny, actually, you can't hear this. I was a nose picker, or I am still a nose picker. I think it actually has had a big impact on my smell. So if you have kids out there and they're picking their nose, you like let them know that Joel says stop it if you want to be able to smell well. It has its advantages, but my nuances are not good. So I mean, like 100 bits per second was your average smell. So
Yeah.
I'd probably bump mine down to like 75.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Have you ever met anyone who just from birth did not have a sense of smell?
Not met. I mean, that was a big thing during COVID, though. Was like people
would lose their sense of smell
and like not gain it back or seemingly. So I can't say. I mean, like I've known people who have lost their sense of smell, but I haven't known anybody who claims to have never had their sense of smell.
I knew one dude who didn't have it, and he was super sensitive about it, as you would expect someone to be if they were missing a sense. But it was awkward, right? Because it's not one that anyone ever thinks about.
Yeah,
not having. And people would say stuff all the time like, "Do you smell it?" He's like, "No." For the last time, "No, I don't."
Wow, it's worse than like them talking to Toph and Avatar. With her vision. Speaking of like representation, that's a great blind representation right there. No, but I would be so afraid if I didn't have a sense of smell. Like, well, that's the weird thing about not having a sense. It's like you don't have a sense of what it's like not to have the sense. So theoretically that there's this thing called being a bad smelling person, and then you have to worry: am I? Mm-hmm. How do I gauge that? you want to almost partner up. I'd be probably so paranoid to have a best friend or a parent or a partner to tell me if I smell okay.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you're just a constant state of fear that you're wreaking.
Yeah, because it can happen to anybody.
Yeah, it could happen to you.
Anyways, so did you want to go ahead and take now with all that information? Are you ready to tier list the cells? Now, I was thinking about like all the senses are great.
Yeah,
I don't think any one of us would want to get rid of one. So I was thinking of keeping it simple: A, B, and C. No S tier, no F tier. They're nothing so good that it belongs above all the others, and nothing so bad that it fails as a sense. At least not in the average person.
I don't know about that.
Well, maybe the sense of taste in 20-something year old men, for fashion.
See. Yeah. Okay.
That fails. All right. The way I was thinking about this, we can talk through it, and we'll see if it takes too much time. But I was thinking of it from two perspectives. Each sense, we think, what would life be like if it was the only sense we had, and what would life be like if it was the only sense we didn't have?
Ooh.
So, this is probably pretty easy. We've seen plenty of media with blind people. So vision, let's go there first. Vision is probably fairly easy to conceptualize. What is it like to to not have vision?
So, I mean, I think it probably feels dangerous.
Yeah.
Because the world is constructed with the thought that people can see in mind. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's very accommodating. Now, I'm not knocking people who can't see and their ability to navigate the world. I think they do a fantastic job. But, I mean, there's a reason why in humans it's so high up. And and it's not going to get to 1 million bits per second and us not mold our world around it in some meaningful ways. We're inundated with signs.
Oh, yeah.
We put a tremendous effort in the aesthetics of things, the visual aesthetics of things. So for that reason, I feel like it would be very dangerous, and you're missing out on a lot of beauty in the world if you did not have vision. What do you think?
I mean, I can agree for the most part. I definitely think that we've made life without vision better in the past, like probably 100 years or so, like not even that long, post World War II, I'd probably imagine. I do feel like you're right, though. I'm sure this is going to be true for any of these senses. If you don't have the sense, you probably feel very vulnerable in the world. I forget where I heard this, but I remember somebody saying that they were ranted at by a blind man, and the guy, was like maybe drunk or high, and said something to the effect of, if society collapsed, we're going to be like, nobody's going to take care of us. We're just going to be meat. You know, it was like, oh, that's a very, very scary thought. But but what would it be like for us only to have vision? We can kind of imagine this because we can imagine watching a show with the volume off. I think it'd be very confusing. It would still be like a very flat representation of the world, because I think we get our third dimension from the other senses coming at us. But I think that he would, at the very least, you would have something beautiful to look at if all you could do was see.
I think even better analogy than watching a show with the sound off would be virtual reality without audio.
Yeah.
Because you can't touch anything.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not hearing it, you can't taste anything. I think that's part of the reason why virtual reality has yet to completely grip people is so far we've really only got 2 of the senses on board. And until we have a consumer product that delivers all 5 senses on VR, we're not going to see people hooking themselves up to IVs to stay in it all day.
Yeah, exactly. It's at the very least, it's going to need touch. I think touch
will go a long way.
Yeah. I think we could probably agree that vision is going to be an A tier.
Vision's got to be A tier.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason it's our number one vision now, but I will say, remember, I brought it up earlier, gotta respect the fact that they say don't always trust your eyes.
Can't trust your eyes all the time.
Yeah.
There are,
too much information's coming in sometimes.
Yeah.
So we want to break from it. Why do you think it's probably one of the reasons we sleep? Though, moving on to hearing, I'll start this off with this little factoid. I've been listening to things. I'll put on a podcast or a sleep story on YouTube to go to sleep. And one thing I have noticed is when you go to sleep, you stop hearing. Like because I'll go in and out, and then all of a sudden I'll realize it's obvious been 30 minutes since I last heard anything from this. It's like it blocks out just as much as vision does.
Is it that you're not hearing, or is it that you're like desensitized to, like you're like, okay, that voice, that sound, I've, like my brain classifies it as something I don't need to pay attention to, so I'm going to stop paying attention to. Because like for me, I'll wake up with a start if I hear one of my kids running down the hall, or if I hear something, but it has to be like a unique, specific type of sound. So my brain is clearly processing sound because I know it's sound that I'm reacting to. I can't see them.
Yeah.
I can't feel them or touch them or,
I guess, yeah, it's definitely a tune out. It's definitely, I guess it falls into that same category of like, if you were to lose time, maybe, you know, if you were to like, be like, blacked out, I guess it's kind of like in that blackout territory. I'm sure I'm actually like, my brain is hearing it and deciding just not to even.
Just tuning it out.
Yeah, just completely tuning it out. So yeah, hearing, I guess let's first think. We know the deafness, yet again, a common one. There's been plenty of movies, beautiful movies made about people who have like overcome or at least dealt with being deaf. Any thoughts from your perspective?
So are we thinking about what it would be like to be deaf?
Yeah. I mean, like, like we'll appreciate the aspect of hearing from the perspective of not having hearing.
About not having it. I mean, to me, hearing makes the world better in a lot of ways. I think like hearing voices, hearing sounds, there's a lot of utility there, but is it one that I feel like if I didn't have it, I'm just completely screwed? It's definitely more on the, it would be closer on the chopping block than certainly vision. And then I think even some of these other ones that we're going to talk about, I would probably push to get. Hearing would be one I would let go of first.
Well, so it's like, imagine the what is it? The fates have like 5 twines in front of them, each one representing your senses, and they cut one, and they have to cut one before you can leave. Hearing, you're saying, is going to be pretty high up on your block, potentially. Yeah. Okay, so I've already moves it down to kind of in the B territory. I will say I worked my priest at my church growing up. He worked with deaf people. He knew sign language. That was a big part of like a lot of sermons he gave. And he always said, and granted, this is coming from deaf people, so they probably are biased, but they said they would rather have their hearing and not their vision than vice versa because of the social implications. We mostly communicate through voice. So, and also there's, even if you learn sign language, you can communicate with people who know sign language, but imagine like what percentage of the population knows sign language.
I think with not having vision, you probably feel like you're missing a lot of information. I think with hearing, you probably feel like you're being socially excluded all the time because you're seeing what you're missing.
Yeah.
And you know when you're not being accommodated.
Yeah.
Vision, you can kind of have plausible deniability. Like, I don't know what's going on around me. Maybe they don't see me. I don't see them. But with hearing, they see you.
Yeah.
And if they're not interacting with you. So I could see how that would be very, very painful from a social perspective.
100%. So, I mean, like I said, it's like that was his perspective or what he got from them. So I would say though that I think the world with sound might be more beautiful than the world with vision. Like if I only had one sense, I might go for sound because you get music, you get communication in the broadest sense. Now, what are you going to talk about if you can't smell or touch? That's going to be a little weird, but at the very least, you can communicate and you can hear. So you get music, you get a lot of the natural world and the natural beauty that you associate with vision is just as much there with sound. So where would you put it? Because I think we're slightly in disagreement on this one.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like I wasn't fully appreciating the social aspect, I think. Sorry. Winston is doing a number on my eyes.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear
that.
You're I have eye drops. You want some?
No, I'm okay. I'll make it. In the interest of making sure that there are, there's some staggering here, I'm probably going to say vision is a cusp between A and B tier for me. I definitely wouldn't want to get rid of it. I love it. No complaints there. Mm-hmm. But, and maybe it's that I just take it for granted. You know what I mean? Like, because I'm not such a huge music person, I'm not one of those people who just, I love music, I love sound, and I can disappear in it. But I think there's just some people that music is almost magic for.
Yeah.
And I don't connect with music on that level. I certainly love talking to people. But maybe I am not as predisposed to appreciate music as some people. I'm going to give it, it's going to be a cusp between A and B for me, just because I do feel like I have to give some distinction between
vision and sound.
Mm-hmm.
I would, yet again, it's going to probably land in a high B, but I think still B.
Okay.
So I guess let's get this going so we can get through the, get you out of here for your allergies. I really need to. It's probably because if you can't tell at home, I moved my furniture around, so I wouldn't be surprised if that whipped up some of Winston's hair into the air. So where are we? So we're going down the hierarchy. So touch is beautiful, but we have kind of an example of somebody who only had touch in a way. Helen Keller. It's probably the closest example we can get. She still had taste and smell from what we understand, but I mean, like losing vision and hearing, that's probably the best example of a unknown person.
So are we starting with if you only had touch or if you didn't have touch?
Let's start with if you didn't. I like starting from if you didn't and then move into if you only.
I think without touch, like do you feel anything? Like bodily sensations at all?
Well, that's what I mean.
Do you feel hot? Do you feel cold? Do you feel pain?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're certainly not feeling sex.
Pretty high on my list of importance, so.
Texture. I mean, I think touch is A tier for me. I mean, not to jump the gun here, but like, without touch, I wonder whether or not you even feel alive.
It's probably very numb. I mean, that's like, that's sort of like what opiates are known for, right? Is to like cut off your sense of sensation, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, that's like probably the first thing. I mean, so imagine just being in that sort of like a detached stupor all the time. You make a great point. So if you only had touch, I mean, you're probably going to be unfortunately, I hate to say, but it's probably going to be a big burden if you're missing all the other senses but touch, because you're going to not only be like incapable of really navigating the world, but you're going to want to navigate the world to find new sensations to feel. Like if that's all the input you're getting in. I don't know. That's a tough one. I mean, you said A tier. We put hearing B tier. I mean, like just the fact that you can't feel pain, that is the scariest thing to me, because without and I'm somebody who's actually going through persistent pain right now due to a neck thing going on. The idea of not feeling pain is so scary, because that is like the number one way that you're going to end up with an injury that's going to kill you. So I think you're right. I think we have to give touch A tier.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So let's we're down to the last two. So these two go so hand in hand together. I almost want to ask about them together, but let's separate them out. Taste first. If you want to put them together, feel free, but let's start with taste.
I mean, I'm gonna do taste and give taste higher marks than smell, for part of the reason you said earlier, which is like when you really want to embrace something, you go with taste. So if we were in a world where all we had was taste, it's not the strongest sense by itself, unless your bit rate just shoots up, right? Which we can talk about later on the Patreon conversation. But in a vacuum, I mean, how many things are even ending up in your mouth?
Some pretty important stuff, but
you can't feel it because you don't have touch.
Oh,
you can taste it,
yeah,
but it doesn't feel like anything. So, I mean, I do think taste is one of the taste and touch are the two most hedonistic pleasures, I think.
That's fair. That's a good way of putting it.
So I do think you get a lot of benefit out of it. Now, not having taste. I mean, a lot of us experience some version of this, like, again, with COVID. You lose your sense of taste. A lot of us have done it. I mean, it just makes eating feel very mechanical, but you technically can still kind of get by, Mm-hmm. It's obviously important, but it tastes for humans, again, and we can kind of see it's less attenuated than some of our other senses, part of me wants to give it a tier because I love to eat so much.
Yes, you're quite the chef too.
But I think we have to be honest and say this is probably closer to a B tier, maybe even cusping C.
I would say that if you separate them out, I think like taste and smell together equal probably. I mean, it's hard to argue that they're not A tier, but I think if you separate them out, like the idea of like I could smell something and then I could eat it and it doesn't have taste. I mean, it's a little disappointing, but I don't think your life, for the most part, I mean, yeah, every now and then there's going to be something that if you can't taste it and it's bad, you could do damage to yourself, but it's not nearly as a daily inconvenience or daily hazard as not having touch, period. So I have to imagine. And also I think like the world with only taste, like how are you supposed to get anything done if all you can do, like, or you're just going to pop everything you touch into your mouth? I mean, that would be awful. So I think I'm actually going to, because we need to fill out the chart. I'm going to propose taste goes into C tier. It's a nice to have, but you don't need it.
Yeah, for me, it's right there, BC cost. But again, like I think if we did a tier list for pleasure and a tier list for survival, I would have different feelings.
Yeah.
Taste is one of the greatest pleasures.
Uh-huh.
But from a survival standpoint, it's one of the most dispensable. I would say, certainly with human biology as it is.
Yeah, but then we go with smell, which, like I've said before, I think is like one of the most. I think it's very important for survival purposes. So, if the world without smell, I mean, there is things you can get done that other people can't. You'd actually become kind of a benefit to your. If say it's a small tribal society, you're the guy who can go into like the danky sewagey area and go scavenge out there, because you're not bothered by it. That might actually be important.
Yeah, I mean, it does.
It has its ups, I will at least say. A world without smell.
Yeah, I agree. Like I think it's not a complete loss because there's just so many unpleasant odors in the world, and the amount of and maybe I'm underestimating it because once you have a sense of smell, you don't really realize how much use you're getting out of it. Like, there's certainly pleasant smells, but part of the benefit of a pleasant smell is because you were trying to mask, an unpleasant smell a lot of the time.
I put on cologne before I record instead of showering, so I was trying to mask an unpleasant smell, which is me.
And I'm congested so often that I don't have a sense of smell a lot of the time, and I don't miss it.
Yeah,
and except for in very specific situations. Not nearly as much as I miss sense of taste. So for me, this smell for me is much more squarely in the C tier than taste.
Even taste, okay.
Taste is C cusping B, even though I want it to be A.
Yeah.
Smell for me is just C.
See, I think I would flip taste and smell. I would think smell would actually be the one that's cusping B, but I think I can agree with you that in terms of survival, it's probably the lowest tier. I think it's the most romantic of all of, and I mean that in the big R way. It's like, the smell of your mother's cookies that she baked, and like when you walk back into your house and you smell that again, and it opens up sense memory, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
that there's something very romantic and grandeur about smell, and it's one of the few that we can't capture in a very replicable way. You can't you don't really go to a theater and smell anything. They might blast you. I don't know. Like there was like smell-o-vision, but it's definitely the most novel of like the ways to like tell a story. So I don't know. But I do agree. Like when we're talking about survival, there's almost a benefit to not having smell. Not everybody wouldn't want to have smell, but the person who doesn't have smell, like was it in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. It's almost like in the land of the smelly, the guy without smell, without sense of smell can get around.
He gets it done.
He gets it done. So I guess there's the tier
How
list.
do we do?
Yeah. So our A tiers are touch and vision. Vision probably first, right? If between the two.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know because, again, if you don't feel anything, because I mean that's the thing, right? Like,
yeah.
I mean, I guess you might feel things emotionally, but even then, I mean, I guess it's like where does touch begin and end? But if you just have no sensation,
yes,
then I'm not sure. I think sensation is what enables all these other things to kind of.
From a survival standpoint, yeah, I agree. You aren't going to survive this world without touch. So okay, touch first, vision in the A tier. Then B tier is our hearing, and C tier is taste, followed by smell.
Yeah, that would be my. That would be my read.
I think I would just switch smell and taste. But besides that, I think we got it.
Yeah. So how did we do? Let us know, right? Let us know somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, you can let us know on the YouTube comments. You can add us on TikTok with a video response, or you can leave us a review on Apple Podcast 5 stars, and we will read your review here on the show. Now we're going to take a quick break to first have a Patreon exclusive conversation. So if you haven't yet, go to Mega Mouse Studios on Patreon and sign up for free while you can, and you can get all of our bonus content. Every week we're going to have a little conversation just for the patrons. And after that, we'll get back into, while we're all here, the game of the week.
This week, we want to tell you about a brand new game coming to Kickstarter on September 10th called Pantheon. It's a new strategy game from Archwood Games. In it, you play a demigod competing against your siblings for the control of the creation of a brand new world. It is a very fun game with secret agendas and a lot of back and forth. Check it out on Kickstarter September 10th.
Now, back to the show. Welcome back, Secret Keepers. We've learned a lot about the five senses so far today, but how are we going to turn them into a game? Because, what's the point of doing this if we ain't getting paid?
We got to gamify it.
We got to gamify it. So I'm going to pitch Danny a game, and he will rank it as to how likely we are to make it. So that... Sorry. God.
Yeah, and to be clear, if this is your first time listening to the show, we are game designers. We have a game studio, Mega Moth Studios. Making games is what we do. And so that is when we say we're going to rank it on how likely we are to make it, we might actually make it. This is our thing.
This wouldn't be the first one that we've talked about in depth after the show. So the categories that we have are toss it, which, throw it away, get it out of here, not worth investigating. Then we have shelve it, which is put it away, marinate on it, see how we think of it with fresh eyes. And then the final,
bop it.
Twist it.
Twist it.
Yeah. And the final one being make it, which is let's get started on a prototype ASAP. So, and once we ship our game X Seekers of Fortune, I think we're going to our next project might even be one of the games we pitched in a previous episode. So you might want to go back and figure out which one that is.
Yep.
All right, Danny. So my game today, I feel like this, sometimes I feel like the game makes total sense with something that already exists. And that's, you take something familiar and you just twist it a little, and that's usually the best product to put out there. At least that's what I've heard in the past. So my pitch is a variation on 20 questions. The version of 20 questions you might be familiar with from Inglourious Bastards. You take a card, you write something on it, and you pass it to the person next to you. They put it on their head. Everybody can see what they are, except for them. And then they have to ask everybody around them, what am I? But the twist in this version is each other player represents one of the senses. And they each have
interesting.
A little, if we want to, dally it up, we can have each sense being represented by a little token or something on a stick. So vision maybe as a glasses on a stick, that sort of thing, nose on a stick, and you have to go around and ask each person, each sense what you're like from their perspective, and you could dig deeper with them, but it still, I think, holds the 20 questions rule. You get 20 questions amongst the five senses to dig in and try to figure out what you are. I think this would be a good game, probably a good party game. Could be a good game for kids to get to learn to communicate about senses better with each other. So that's, pretty cut and dry.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea for a game. I think so. For me, a couple things, thinking about it from a game design perspective. First is it a competitive or cooperative game? Because the thing about competitive games where you have to come up with mechanics that make it to where I'm incentivized to give you good clues and you're incentivized to make good guesses, right?
Yeah.
So if it's not just a strictly cooperative game...
that's why 20 questions usually is yes and no questions, right? Because that way, you don't have a chance to twist it.
Right.
So you'd have to be flat out lying to try to get your opponent to get what they are.
Yeah, and I do think it might be a stretch for a lot of people to ask 20 questions that are sensory related. Because it's do I smell pungent? Do I smell sweet? Do I smell, do I look like a fruit? So I think, it would be interesting, I'm almost wondering what it would be like. And again, not sure mechanically how this all works out, but it's I hold up the thing and then I have to go in a circle and it's and maybe it's a group thing, right? So it's a cooperative game. I hold up my thing and I go to you. You're the first person vision, right? And you have to tell me with some stipulations about, taboo style stipulations, something about what it is. And I can make a guess or I have to go.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I go to the next person and it's smell. They have to tell me something about how it smells, whatever. And then we get to the end. And depending on how many clues in you get it is how many points everyone gets for that round. If they violate the rules, they lose it. No one gets anything. I don't know. Because I think
I think a big thing here is probably
Yeah.
curation. It's like, unlike 20 questions where anybody can name anything as long as it's a person, place, or thing, right? And you can just play like out of the box with cue cards or with index cards. This game actually might need to be curated on the game designer standpoint of like, you have a box of cards that we know all of these will bring up good conversations, and you can't just like turn to vision and be like, what do I look like, and they can tell you and you got it. Like, it's like something like where what you look like is, I don't know, imagine trying to explain a Zeppelin. Like, how do I explain what a Zeppelin looks like without saying, using the word Zeppelin, that sort of thing. So it might be more in the curation, that aspect. But I do agree, we also have to be mindful of cooperation, people playing nice. I mean, I always lean towards everybody wants to have a good time, but there's a lot of people out there who would rather win than have a good time. So
yeah, I think it would be. I mean, I think you could also do a head-to-head version of the game where you had groups and you did a more taboo style. And you kind of have to go down the list, and then you have, but ultimately, I think this game would just be a funny game. I think that's ultimate, and I also think it would be. I think ideally you want to make people laugh, and I think you want people. I think you want to like elicit conversation about how people sense things, because I'm sure you're going to get a lot of like, what do you mean it smells like cheese? That absolutely doesn't smell like cheese.
Exactly. Yeah. 100%. Or it's like you're trying to describe what blue cheese smells like and you can't use the word cheese, obviously.
Yeah, mold.
Yeah.
Smells like mold.
It looks like mold.
It tastes like mold.
Feels like hard goop somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's weird. Crumbly.
Oh, look, I've got a phone call. Oh, it's Walgreens.
Well, of course. Hey guys, we're going to get some Walgreens information in right here. Okay.
I'm going to go to voicemail on the Walgreens.
Hell yeah. That makes power move. If you're in a room with somebody and you ignore the Walgreens call, you make the other person feel like $1 million. It's how Tom Cruise has made all his movies.
If you do it on podcast, you make 1 million people feel like $1 million, or however many people are in your audience. So I guess
10.
Yeah.
Well, Danny, I think you've seen some potential flaws of the game, but where would you rank it? I mean, you can toss it, you can shelve it, or you can make it.
This is one, and it makes me wonder if there's like a new category here. But like, I would want to make a prototype, bring it to a party, get some base reactions, and decide whether or not I felt like we were close to having something. And if like we got some good reactions, maybe tweak it. And if it was kind of like a dud, just shelve it and say like, let's wait for inspiration.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a toss.
It's not. Yeah. I will say this. I'm not usually up for this. But this is the perfect game for a not safe for work variant.
I am so into a not safe for work variant of this.
I'm sure our partners would be too. All right, guys. Well, I think that's all we can say about that for now. Hopefully nobody beats us to the punch. So what? As always, what say you, fellow travelers? Would you make this game or would you toss it? Danny, can you let them know how they can share their opinion?
Yeah, let us know either in the comments of the YouTube, by going to our social media channels. We're at Mega Moth Studios on TikTok. We are at Mega Moth Studios on Instagram or something like that. If you put that in there, you'll find it. Anyway, like along the sides of the thing.
Yeah, we've had them up here for a while now.
Yeah, and then if you're listening, I'm sorry, but just search Mega Moth Studios. We'll get better at this. We used to have this stuff in front of us. We no longer do.
Yeah, I'm cheating. I have it in front of me, but I'm not telling Danny.
No, he's not going to tell me.
No, not at all. Yeah.
But ideally, the best thing to do is go to Houston, Texas. 77.
Will, you have to edit this out. All right. There you have it, Secret Keepers. And while you're at it, be sure to share, like, and subscribe, and let a friend know who might just disagree with us about the senses tier list. If you know somebody who has like an acute sense of smell and they have some opinions about it, send this to them and then have them duke it out with us in the comments section. But that's it for today's episode of the Mega Moth Studios Super Secret Podcast. I would like to thank my co-host Danny for suffering through the cat dander. Yeah. And I have been Joel, reminding you that you must start somewhere. So why not here? Thanks for listening. Produced and edited by William Wymore. Theme music by James Holden.